What are startup advisors, and why would you award them equity compensation? That is, why would you provide them with an ownership interest in the startup business? Well, to begin with, an advisor to a startup is really an unofficial position. Most startups that are organized as a corporation have a board of directors. Well, oftentimes the startup will create a secondary board, an unofficial board, called a board of advisors. And this board is not part of the corporate governance structure. It is simply a panel, if you will, constructed of individuals who have some ability to provide or add value to the company, generally through advice or guidance of some sort. Generally, you put advisors on your board, your advisory board, who have experience in the industry, have industry connections, or can otherwise provide some level of value such as introductions, industry knowledge, perhaps access to capital, intellectual property input, something of that nature. So, the role of the advisor is simply to add value by any means possible. Now, how is this different from an employee? Well, an employee works for the company and receives a salary. An independent contractor is an outside person who is paid to perform a service for the business. In a way, an advisor is legally an independent contractor. So they are third parties who are performing a service for the company, but they are not an employee of the company. Now, these advisors tend to be influential, oftentimes affluent, and if you were to pay them their compensation rate, it would be quite expensive, or they actually would not do it for what the startup could afford. But in order to take advantage of the potential of the startup, these advisors are willing to provide what value they can in exchange for an ownership interest in the company. Now, why would you grant equity or grant an ownership interest to the advisor? Well, you really need the value that the advisor can provide, and the advisor does not want money, or you do not have money to give them that is adequate to meet their needs or demands. So instead, you allow them to take, one, an interest in the company so that they are motivated in the company's success, and two, they are able to take advantage of the upside, so the potential value of what they're receiving is far more than they would receive now, just in terms of dollars. So that is why startups routinely grant equity to these individuals on advisory boards. Now, how much should you grant an advisor? Well, just like with an employee, it's based on how much value the advisor adds to the company. If the advisor works diligently for the company, provides valuable connections, perhaps markets for the company, it's very common for a celebrity to be added to a advisory board because they bring an audience. They can cut marketing expenses for the company considerably just by using their influence to make people aware of the product or service. Sometimes people with industry connections or something of that nature, again, can add tons of value. In that scenario, you might award as much as 2, 3, 4% ownership of the company, depending on how much value they have had. I've never heard of a scenario where a startup awarded more than that, and even in that scenario, the individual was providing extensive value through their industry connections and celebrity status. But for a non-celebrity, for a person who simply has industry knowledge and can provide a ton of value, it's more common to see an award between 0.1% and 2% interest in the company. Someone receiving 2% interest is probably dedicating several hours a month to helping the startup, and that is very valuable time that they're adding. Someone who's receiving perhaps a 0.1%, on the other hand, maybe is jumping on a phone call for 1 hour a month or every 2 months just to give general advice to the company because they have some level of experience in the industry. So that's normally what you see. Some range between 0.1% or 0.05% and up to 2-3%, with very rare cases you see 4 or 5% interest being awarded to someone, but those are generally rare cases. So that's how startup advisors function within the startup advisory board, and that is why you will grant them equity ownership interest in your company in exchange for that value that they add.